I made a conscious decision at one point in my life to study the sciences, and I really graduated from arts in high school and went back and did sciences at a community college and worked very, very hard and got into a university in North Wales where a friend of mine was studying. And I kept wanting sort of more meat in my work, and when I finished my bachelor's, I had an offer to go to Cambridge University to work with two of the top animal behavioralists in the world at that time, Bateson and Hind. And I went for this interview. They asked, well, the first question they asked was, how far down in the animal kingdom do you think an animal can feel pain? And well, I thought, wow. I mean, I told them I really liked the question because it really required thought, and it was philosophical as well as a neurological answer to it. I mean, what animals have nervous systems. Anyway, I applied to UBC to do a master's degree in biochemistry. That was the meat that I was talking about, getting more into the biochemical realm. And I did a master's in biochemistry, and then I went to work at BC Cancer Research as a technician. My first job was to analyze vitamin A from human skin cells from inside the mouth that we were scraping out of people's mouths. And I worked there as a technician for a number of years, and then the fellow that I was working under that ran the department at Cancer Research, which was environmental carcinogenesis, suggested I do a doctorate degree. And up until that time, I had been trained, all my courses in research and direction had been within the modern medical scientific realm. I was trained in Western science, and I often say they made the mistake of sending me to India to do research there on oral cancer, because in India I was exposed to people using Ayurvedic and herbal medicines, which were thousands of years old. And I saw old people walking around that looked fairly slim and in good shape, and they weren't taking antidepressants or on heart medicines. And I started to look deeper into herbal medicines, moving away from my training in pharmaceutical type medicines and structures. And then I came back to Canada after finishing and I ran into a herbalist here in Canada. My father-in-law was dying of cancer at that time, and his family brought in a herbalist from the interior of BC, and before I met this fellow, I said, I'll have an open mind, because I'd just come back from India where it had been opened. And this fellow got out these different herbal concoctions on the table, and he told me to taste them. So I didn't take a little taste. And when I put it against my tongue, my whole mouth would light up. It was an amazing action to these herbal preparations that he'd made. That took me further into the herbal realm, and I began doing research for this fellow, and in 1998, I started my own research company with a focus on herbal and supplemental medicines. What brought myself into cannabis research? Can I show you a little bag here? I'd love to do this. Let's turn this around. It's called hemp tea. A little bag of innocuous looking tea from Grand Forks, BC. And this fellow in Grand Forks, who was a 6'6" Doukhobor with a long beard, and he would go out into the field, and so he'd harvest these young hemp seedlings, dry them, and put them into this bag, and he was selling at a cafe in Grand Forks, and little old ladies were coming up to him on the street and giving him a hug, thanking him for a good night's sleep. What he wanted myself to do was to use my HPLC to analyze the cannabinoids. Now, over the years, I've learned that cannabidiol is, in my mind, the most medicinal of all cannabinoids. But I love the profile of this little tea, and he had great effects with it, and he was trying to get it accepted by Health Canada, and there was no way they would let him ever license or sell it or do anything with it.
Why do you think?
that opens up a huge can of worms, sir. There's a multi-billion-dollar industry out there that doesn't want these products on the market. Nevertheless, a major change occurred for myself when this fellow that brought the hemp tea from Grand Forks introduced me to Hilary Black of the Compassion Club here in Vancouver, the original Compassion Club. She told of 7 strains from Holland that, simply put, a person with chronic pain would take strain A over and over again, a person with seizure disorder would take strain B, a person with Crohn's disease would take strain C. All the time knowing that there are thousands of strains of cannabis, each one has a different profile. It's like a fingerprint. And they have different efficacy, meaning it'll do what you say it'll do or have the desired effect in a specific illness. And Hilary spoke of these 7 strains. I began analyzing them and then looking at the effects that it was having on the people, how a profile would affect a person. Then I had purchased some years earlier a farm in Richmond, a small acreage farm, where we had a greenhouse, and Hilary and myself and her favorite grower decided to grow some medicinal cannabis in our greenhouse. And we signed a contract with the club for the amount that we would grow and how much we would receive for it. And the night that contract was signed, I went to heaven, because now I had it. I had the 7 strains being grown in my greenhouse. I could take them and analyze them at any time through their growth cycle. I could talk to Hilary at the effects that she was seeing at the Compassion Club. And that heaven lasted for about 6 months, and then the RCMP came and called. When 10 of them arrived with guns pulled, and we were all arrested, and it all went to hell. And it all broke up pretty sourly after that. And that was a traumatic time. And I learned a lot from that. I have never stopped analyzing cannabis because I only need a very small amount to do it. I need less than a gram. So I don't need cannabis on site. I just need small samples. I've had heated discussions with colleagues about why cannabis is illegal. In my mind, it disappeared around the same time as the pharmaceutical industries came into being, around the turn of the century. Illegal. The pharmaceutical industries have flourished in those years. When they discovered the receptor in the early 1990s, like I said, there's been an explosion of research around the endocannabinoid system. The last time I counted, the pharmaceutical industry has already synthesized 120 new drugs around this system. These will be used for weight loss, depression, various things. Synthetics are made in test tubes. Biological compounds are made by enzymes, plant enzymes most often. I have marveled, I continue always marvel at the complexity of the human system. We are just astoundingly complex. Then along comes this plant called cannabis, and I start studying it and looking at its efficacy. And in my simple mind, it is the most profoundly efficacious herb on the planet. Here's a good point, though. The receptor for THC was discovered in the early 1990s. I remember the day it happened. I remember hearing about it. There's actually a receptor there for it. As it turns out, that receptor is the most abundant G protein binding site in the human brain, but it's one of the most abundant receptors, too. It's all over the place. Most of these receptors are within the central nervous system. And when the receptor is bound, the overall effect is general slowdown in neurotransmission, hence pain relief, hence seizure relief. I look at cannabis as a CNS balancer, in the right dosage, of course, but it can be definitely used long-term, balancing the CNS, relieving pain, relieving seizures, and it's not going to hurt you. It's not going to kill you in time. It's not going to destroy your heart, liver, or kidneys from toxicity.